Hello and welcome to this introductory tutorial about Illustrator. We're going to create this winter scene or something very similar to it, and this will allow us to explore quite a few of the tools and ideas that are in Illustrator. So a few of those ideas are the basic shapes, some of the Pathfinder tools. We'll also look at using the pencil tool, maybe a little bit of the pen tool, and a few other things. So let's get started here. So first thing we'll do is we'll create a new scene. So we can simply file new and, depending on what you want to do, we're just going to use a letter size paper here. You can find that if you can't see it right there, probably on print. That's your typical piece of paper. I mean, A4, same sort of deal. And we're going to set the orientation here to landscape rather than portrait. Okay, we leave all the other things as they are and just go create here. So we end up with a starting page, okay? And the next thing we want to do is sort of choose the colors. And this is always a little bit of a tricky thing if you're just going to try to do it on your own. But we will actually go in and use one of the tools that comes with Adobe, and that's basically Adobe, Color. And so I've got that open up already, and you can, let me just bring it over, there we go. You can log into this with your SD35 account. And when I sort of take a look on here, there's a few different things. So create, and you can sort of move this around. I don't know too much about colors, I have to admit. I'm not an art teacher, but this really helps me out because I can especially go into the Explore one here. And like it says, you can search with colors, moods, keywords like ocean, wine, moonlight, lucky, water, and it will choose a bunch of colors for you. So I'm going to type in winter because that's what we're doing. We're doing a winter scene. And so right away, you can see there's a lot of, blues and stuff like that. And that's kind of the look we're going for. So something that sort of struck my eye and what I used basically was this palette here. And I believe we can just click on it. Now you can get all the hexadecimal ones. I'm going to show you a little trick here that will make your life a bit easier. So I'm just actually going to take a screenshot of it. I'm going to use my snipping tool. And with that snipping tool, I am going to snip this. And I'm not worried about the color codes there or anything. You could do this, but I'll show you a nice little way to get around that. So if I go back into Adobe, I'll just paste that in. So these are my color swatches here. I'm just going to make that smaller. If you hold Shift, it will maintain the proportions. And whatever, it doesn't really matter where it is. What I'm going to do is actually sample these and create the swatches here. So I'm going to come over to my swatches, and I'm going to create a new folder to hold on my swatches. So I'm going to come over here like that. So color group, I don't know, maybe just call it winter scene because that's what we're going to do. And you can sort of see there's a folder there. What I'm going to do now is, let me see if I can get this right, choose my color picker here and pick the color. So I'm going to click on that, and you can see that there's that little swatch there. Then I can click and drag it right into my folder. And there it is. So I've got that color now, and I can just go back to it with no trouble. I'm going to do the same thing with all the other ones here. So I did that one, clicked, and this is, whoops, a little bit of a process at the start. Of course, that's in the way there. There we go. And I'll just keep going through with these different blues. And I might not just use these ones exclusively, but at least I've got them available for me to use. I'll probably use a little bit of the gray as well. Probably maybe a pure white for that kind of sun. Yeah, I've got a few different colors that I might use, but at least I have those colors. And yeah, that's my swatch. And you can keep this here. It doesn't really matter. It's fine to be just off the canvas. You can just put it wherever you want. All right, so let's start working away here. Now, what we want to be able to do, taking a look at this, let's first deal with the background. And so we will kind of mess around a bit here with just putting in a rectangle shape. So there's a rectangle there, and then we'll fill it with a gradient. And then basically these kind of clouds or different colors here were just added on later, okay? So that's what we'll do first. And this will be in our background, so that's okay. I'm going to come over to the Basic Shapes tool. And I don't know why my screen always flashes when it does that, but there it is. Click and hold for a second, and you can see all the different shapes that we've got. We're just going to use the rectangle tool. So I'm going to take that rectangle tool, and I'm just going to start at top left. And I'm not too concerned how far I go down. I don't have to go all the way down, but a reasonable distance, and let go. Now it's filled it with probably this fill color here, and that's okay. But like I said, we were going to sort of put a gradient in here. The gradient tool works a little bit different than in Photoshop. So I'm going to grab that, and you can kind of, mess around with it here. I think the problem is because I don't have two colors. So let me just choose a different color. Click on that. I'm going to choose that blue. I'm going to go for two different blues here. So I think this one and this one here. Now it did fill it all with that one color because that's the fill color. So that's why I did that. But now I've got this here. I should be able to add a gradient. If that's not working, and I sometimes can't get it to work. Oh, there we go. I just had to double click. So this is a gradient that's been put on here. And there is actually a gradient menu as well. So I'm just going to pull this up. If that's not available to you, just go under Window and you can find Gradient. And I've just sort of locked mine here. You can see again, sort of like Photoshop, we do have a radial one. So if we go to the radial, we'll have a little bit more control. So here we can choose from our swatches. So I'm going to go back to that, which is, I think, the light one, and then the other blue. Go to the darker, because I'm going to sort of put the moon, or the sun, sorry, I should say there. Let me see. Just trying to see, which one did I do first? So this guy, let me go back to this one. Yeah, that's that one. And then maybe I'm not getting enough. Oh, well, that's better. Yeah, I think that's what I want. So then I can move this around a bit. Not that. Let me just see if I can move the circle. Give me 1 second. That's going to rotate it. Should be able to move this here. There we go. So I can move that over, and I'm going to move it over roughly to here because I'm going to put my sun into this spot at some point. Okay, so roughly over there. I can always come back and do it. If you want to, make it sort of whiter, you can kind of do it like that. I think this also, I could move that back into the center, and then, whoops, just sort of move this whole thing around here. Rotate. That's sort of cheering it out. Yeah, I guess I can kind of. Let's see. This isn't my favorite tool, sort of to move. I thought, there, that's probably what I want to do. There we go. So just sort of moving it around roughly to where that white spot would be. And then we've got that there. So that's going to be our sort of our sky. The other thing that we've got is, so that's part of what we've done. Let's put in these little sort of clouds here. And what we're going to do that is use the pencil tool. And if you come over here, and sorry, my screen flashes when I do this, I don't understand why. There's a bunch of different tools and you kind of have to find it. This one is under the paintbrush tool. So, or not the paintbrush, sorry, where is it there? Under that one there we go. So under the paintbrush, there is a pencil tool. Now, the other thing you can do is you can double click on that. Okay, oh, there it is. And you have this pencil tool options. We're probably using a mouse here, so it's hard to get a really nice draw. So with a mouse, so I'm going to make sure that it's on smooth, and usually I'm going to fill that new with sort of give it a fill there, and then keep it selected as well. So I'm going to put those ones in there. This is to close the path. We have to sort of draw it back and make sure that it's back there, and we should be good with the rest. So I'm going to go OK. Grab that pencil tool. I'm going to make sure my fill color is a bit different. So I can choose that. Oops, just a second. Color swatches. Not that. I guess I'll just click over here. There. So I'm going to make sure it's the lighter one. I think that's going to be the one I want. And I'm going to, again, you don't have to do exactly this. I'll sort of do one there, one over there, and another one. So let's do these three. And so I'm going to just take my pencil. And I'm just trying to create a little bit of patterns. And even though it's really messy, it sort of smooths it out for us there. So I'll do another one over here. Just sort of different, give a clouds a little bit of an edge. Now I see a little bit of a problem we've got. These you can see have a edge on them and they don't look very good with an edge. I don't know what happened there. I can fix that up. I'll show you. I'm going to hold shift. I'm going to select those three. And I'm just going to make sure the fill, which is this, or sorry, the stroke, which is this one down here, is set to none. I don't want to stroke around the edges. So if you see that, now there's nothing on that edge. Now, if I wanted to go in and sort of improve a few, I don't know what I've done here. If you take this is the regular selection tool. This solid white arrow is the direct selection tool. And what that lets you do is it comes into these anchors and you can modify it. So if I wanted to pull that in, well, we'll talk more about these later on. I'm just going to try to change the shape a little bit here, just to smooth things out a bit. And so you could sort of create some different and smoother shapes, I guess, in these sections here. So I've done that there. I might even just redo it, right? I mean, it's not a big deal. I don't know how this got crossed here. I'm just going to pull that in, and then maybe this, because it's a bit of a point here. Like I said, we'll talk more about how to smooth out points. If that's really causing problems, I think under the properties down here, you should have access to the properties. We can just make sure that's a smooth. Let me just click on that anchor point. That's an anchor. We should be able to tighten it and then smooth it. Ooh, that was nice. Okay, smooth that out. There we go. So yeah, I'm not going to spend too long on it. You can make yours look better, but something a bit like that. Okay, so the idea is giving that kind of look, right? So we should be pretty good there. Last thing we'll do for this sky is we'll put in the sun. And so what I'm going to do is choose the ellipse tool. With the ellipse tool, we need to make sure we hold down the shift key if we want a perfect circle. I'm going to do hold shift there. Way too big. Bring that back down. Something like that. And I'm going to fill it with the white. So again, I can come over here, choose either this white that I've got, which is probably fine. And yeah, I mean, that looks okay, but I think it's a little bit on the, too harsh of an edge side. So we're going to sort of blur it out a little bit. And this is unlike, Photoshop, because we're not dealing with pixels. So to actually get this blur, we can't just use a sort of like a fuzzy brush. We're going to come under the effects here. And I believe I can go under blur. And I'm going to try the Gaussian blur here. And we can you can see how it's made it quite nice there. We can play with the radius. So whatever you want is how diffuse you want it, you can choose there. So I'm going to hit OK and just take a little look. Nah, not bad. So now that we've got the sky done, what we can work on is the city. So we've got all these buildings, and you can create as many different shapes of building that you want, right? This is just sort of some ideas here. So feel free to play around and experiment. But what I'm going to do is I think I'll grab this darker color here. So I'll grab the most dark one. And then I don't need a stroke on it. And then I'm just going to come into the basic tools again, and we'll do just a rectangle tool. And so maybe what I'll do first is the sort of that peak. And so what I could do, and there's different ways of doing this, so don't think this is the only way. I can do that. And then you might say, well, how do I draw a triangle? There's a few ways to do it. But probably the easiest is the polygon tool. And you might go, well, okay, that's a hexagon. There's 6 sides there. How do I, do something other than a hexagon? Well, if you double or just click once before you actually draw, you can choose how many sides. And so we could go down to 3, and then there we've got a little triangle, and we can pop it on top. Probably doesn't look right there, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to hold shift to keep the proportions, and then looks like a little hat. This maybe is a little bit too big, but let's just see here. Right. It will try to snap, so sometimes you have to be a little careful. If it's not working out perfectly, let's just see if we can get this a little bit bigger. Do that, I think, and snap that up. That looks pretty good. It usually does snap. There, that's close enough. If this is a little bit too high, remember you can grab your direct selection tool and sort of click on maybe that peak one there. If I can grab it, there we go. And then just sort of pull that down a little bit. Notice those smart guides should help you out so that you don't cause problems. Now, what I should have done, and I forgot to do here, is I should have gone into my layers and made a new layer. So I am actually going to do that, and I'll fix this up here. So we can add a new layer. It's a little bit different in Photoshop because in Photoshop, we sort of had all these different layers. We have layers, but then we also have sub-layers. So you can see here, there's the polygon and the rectangle. So all I'm going to do for the moment is I'm going to grab both of them. So I'm going to click on that one, hold shift, click on that one. I've got both, and just drag those into layer 2. Okay, so now layer 1 is my sky and the palette actually as well. And then layer 2 is going to be this sort of more foreground type. So I can label them as well. I can click on that, so I can call this sky, and I could call this cities or whatever. It's kind of the background in some respects. So I'm going to go through and not worry too much about this because I'm going to hide the bottom there, and just put some cities in. So or some more squares and more rectangles and stuff. So you can make a high one, and this the color change there. So just go to my swatches and just make sure. There it is. If it's still selected, it will change. And I don't know, create a lower one with a little bit of a peak, something like that. And again, I might not make them exactly as they were before. And this one, I've somehow got the stroke off. So let me make sure there's no stroke on it. There we go, that looks better. And you could just, again, don't have to be looking exactly like this. I don't know, another one. Maybe this one, I'll put a little circle on top, so it's kind of like a dome. So I'm going to use the ellipse tool. Just drag this out. And again, you can decide what it should look like. Something like that. Maybe another skinny building in here. And so on. So yeah, whatever you think. Maybe a tall one. I don't know why it keeps, I guess I keep clicking on that. And so it keeps grabbing the other one here. So it's a little bit of a pain. You can also use that. Cancel. Switch that. And none. There we go. And cancel. And then just sort of keep putting these together. Now, one thing I will mention as you're sort of doing this is you can start to join things together. So this and this were made of two separate ones. And you can keep them separate. Or if you hold both down, there is something called the Pathfinder tool. And I have mine up here, but again, if you go Window, Pathfinder, you can come over to here and you can join them together. So you can unite. And so what ends up happening is that it gets rid of anything in the middle and it just becomes one unit. Same thing here. I could hold Shift and then I could do Unite and it joins that all as sort of one shape. Same thing here. Put that together, and then you just have that one nice shape there. So that's kind of a neat thing about Illustrator is you can create shapes from multiple sort of simple shapes and make something a little bit more complex. These are obviously very complex, but yeah, you can do that. Maybe I'll just do one more, and I'll just get it to go right off the side. Now that's another thing is in Illustrator, compared to Photoshop, you don't have to worry about it going off the edge. Perfectly acceptable. Theoretically, when it prints it, it would print it, it would just truncate that bit there. That's fine. Now, another thing that we'll do is create some windows. And so what I'm going to do is just rectangle as well. I think I already had that on there. And I'm just going to zoom in. So if you hold Alt, just like in Photoshop, you can zoom in there. So I've got one. If I go to my selection tool and then I hold the Alt key, and put my mouse over top of it, you can see there's actually a double arrow there. That allows me to just drag it across. Now, I should create another one with it. Let me just try this again. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now I have sort of two windows. Now it's a little hard to see because I've, for better or for worse, I don't have any color in them. So let me just put a little bit of color so I can see the difference here. Let me just make them white for the moment. Just make that inside white. And we're going to do something with it, so don't worry about them being a little bit different here. Okay, so let's just sort of center this a bit. There, that looks good. And if we wanted to go down, so I'm going to hold Shift and select both, And again, hold the Alt key and you can see the double arrow. And then we could sort of put another set of windows and maybe one more near the bottom here. And then those little guides help you out there just to line things up. So I've got 6 windows here. Now I've got a choice. I could put a fill in there or whatever the case is. I might just choose to, I'm going to highlight all of them and then the back one too. And I'm going to just make it sort of see-through. So it's going to see the sky there and it'll give a good effect. So I'm going to do on the Pathfinder tool, the minus front, and it just sort of cuts the way through. Now, okay, just a second here. This one seemed to have a little bit of an issue, I think because, yeah, I had 2 there, so that was the problem. So yeah, you should be able to do that. So again, the idea, let me just go back here, and I'll fix this up too while I'm at it. Let me just get rid of this guy. Actually, I'll just get rid of everything here. There we go. Just let me fix this here. Alt, put that back up there. There we go. So what I'm going to do is, again, select all of them. And the idea is that we can minus whatever's in the front. So I've selected all 6 of the windows, selected that, and then did the minus front. And it basically just cuts a hole through it. So we're seeing the sky in the background there. And you can do that with these other ones. So create some windows there. I'll just pause it here for a second and you can try working on that. All right, I've just put some more windows in there and hopefully you've done something similar. Next, we'll work on this little bit of foreground here. Well, it's not quite foreground, but it's just sort of going to be background as well. So if you look on this winter scene, I just have maybe some bushes sort of in the way, and then this snow line, just to sort of create a bit of a, that's in the distance there. So what I'm going to do is, again, grab my pencil tool and do my best to draw a few things here. So again, it's sort of up to you. I'm not going to spend too much time. The idea is to sort of, create kind of like that. And the bottom isn't too important, okay? So you can just do whatever you want on the bottom. The idea is to try to create some bushes or something like that. Art isn't always my forte, and I'm trying to do this. It looks like a hand here. Just trying to create something that looks a little bit different. And hopefully you get the idea. Okay, so I've sort of created those across there. Now the color, it's the same as the building, so I just want to see. I might have to shift a color a little bit, or let's go for that little bit lighter there maybe. That might be okay. And then what I'm going to do is sort of this snow line. So I'm going to grab, and we've already got a white here. I'm just going to grab this and draw it across and just fill that with white. So we'll just grab that white there. Sort of it's a little bit of an off-white, which is sort of snow. And then we just want to sort of warp this. Now there's a few ways to do it. There is the warp tool. I just have to find it here, which there it is. And I think it's a brush, so we can make it bigger or smaller. Just a second. I think I might have to go into this tool. So if I double click on it, there's the warp tool. So you can sort of create how much detail, how much it's going to do, or simplify it. I think I'd want to do it a little bit bigger there. The brush, you can sort of see, you can increase the brush size. I'm going to go a little bit bigger. I think I'm going to do both of those big. And this is the amount of warping it will do. I think I'll put that up a little bit. And you might want to sort of play around. So it says the brush size may be interactively changed by holding down the Alt key before clicking with the tool. So if I hold down the Alt key, that's zooming in and out. I'm not entirely sure. Let's just see here. So I want to warp this guy. So it's selected. And I'm warping the whole thing. So give me 1 second there. So just make sure, fix that little problem there, that make sure you've selected this first. That's selected, then go back to your warp tool. And we should be able to, yeah, just sort of pull things down. Now there is a little bit of white underneath as well. So I'm going to maybe do a little bit more to pull up and pull down. Just sort of create a little bit of a non-straight line background. Okay, like I said, there's a little bit of an issue with that there. We could fix that by bringing down the sky a little bit later on. I'm not too concerned. Okay, so what I've got there is, instead of a flat line, we've got a bit of a hill that we've created there. Good. So I think what I'll do is create another layer, and then we're going to focus on sort of creating a few things in the foreground here. So let's just make a new layer. So let's just call this, I guess, the foreground. You can double click on it like I did there. And yeah, we'll start to draw a few things in this area. So let's take a little look at what we have done here. So first thing maybe that we'll draw is the tree. And really it's kind of a pencil tool and then just some blobs with a paintbrush, which we'll talk about. And yeah, so it's pretty easy to do. So let's try that first. So I'm just going to grab my pencil tool again. And like I said, the thing is just to try to be as, I'm just going to lock the city background so I don't actually do that. Just try to draw it, right? So now without my little example there, I might be not as good here, but let's just try. I'm going to go up, and I'm just trying to create sort of the branches part of it. So something like that. Okay. I don't know. What does a tree look like? Who's seen a tree? Okay. So something like that, just making sure I go back to where I started from. And then we can fill that with brown. And again, I'm doing this really quickly, so that's my excuse at least. Okay, so I'm just going to find a brown there that's kind of nice and probably no stroke on it, maybe a little darker. There we go. Okay, so I've got the bare bones of a tree there. You could draw another tree if you want. What I'm going to do is use the brush tool. And so there's the brush. And again, if you double click, you can sort of get the idea there. There is, I think that's the size of the brush there. So just go, okay. And so that's drawing really small ones. Let's just see, because I wanted a bigger brush. So just a second. That's not the width. I guess, hold a second here. There we go. So just use your square, just like in Photoshop, use the, just above the enter key there, your square brackets. And I'm just going to paint, I don't want a brown, I want to make sure that this is probably a gray underneath. So I'm going to do that. Oops, and this is doing a brown. And, oh, I guess it's doing the stroke there. So I just want a sort of a grayish color. And I mean, that might be a little bit too big. So I'm just going to undo that, Control Z, make it a little bit smaller. Basically, I'm just going to sort of do this. Your mileage may vary. And then I'm just going to throw some snow on top. So I'm just going to switch the color to a white. And then maybe the brush a little bit smaller. And just sort of put those on top. Okay, something like that, just as if it was the snow sort of sitting on those branches. All right, so I think that's kind of what I had there. That's kind of the idea. And so just in a quick way, there we go. The tree I probably could have done a better job on, but we'll accept that. And the other thing, what else do I have here? The bench. The bench is relatively easy to do. And again, I'd encourage you to try something else rather than the bench. You know, look at some pictures, think about what you could do. So I'm just going to drag this bench. Again, I'll make this brown here. Now this time, the fill, I definitely want that. I really don't need a stroke there. And so I just did sort of one bar. And then I just duplicated that. So zoom in there probably is good. And just that, Alt. And then Alt again, maybe 4. Maybe that's too many. And then I just did one more down here. This one was sort of the bottom, so I just made it a little bit bigger. Perhaps, I don't know, sticking out a little bit. And then I just did a vertical one to create sort of the post that, and I just switched that to a black. Not the stroke, but the thing. There we go. And then did the one more over there. That's a little bit thick, perhaps, so I'll just sort of go in. I apologize for the flicker. I don't know why. I just pull that in a bit. And then just do the same thing. Hold Alt, go across, and roughly the same distance over. Probably it's a little higher there. Lining up. Maybe something like that. Okay, so there's my bench. Now looking at it, it's a little big. So instead of, trying to resize everything, if I select everything, and it's a little tricky to select it all, I'm just going to select everything there. I think that's it. I can resize the whole thing. So I'm going to bring that down a bit. I think that's better. The bottom, now that I look at it too, is a little thick. So let me just make sure that that's just selected, this bottom one. Bring down that size maybe and bring it in a little bit. So there's, always, once you get something done, you can always fine tune it as well, right? There. Okay, there's my bench. Now the last sort of big thing in my scene, apart from the little path in front, was adding this little lamppost. And again, you can do this in a variety of ways. And so, yeah, I'll just show you one way, but there's a lot of different ways that we could possibly go about this. So I think I'm going to try something different here. I'm going to take my rectangle tool, and I'm going to go in, and I'll do it over here. I'm going to take this, and I'll make it black in a second here. So I'm just going to make a square roughly, and I'll make that black. Okay. Now I cut away that little bit here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try with an ellipse here, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to put that on top, roughly there. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to change its color just so I can see it a bit better. So there's white. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to bring it up a little bit more so I can see a little bit what it's going to look like. I might elongate this and actually get rid of this one and just bring this one over. I think I like that one better. And you can see the shape I'm going to create. This black is what I'm going to create. That's pretty well what I've got there. A little bit different, but just a different way of doing it. So I'm going to hold Shift, select those three, almost looks like a Mickey Mouse or something, and then minus the front. And I sort of created it that way. A little bit different, but yeah, kind of looks good. Looks like a base. I probably didn't center it quite right, but oh well. I'm not going to worry too much here. And then maybe just to simplify this a little bit, do a rectangle. And I'm just going to do that and just narrow it down. And then just move that over. So something like that. And if it wasn't quite tall enough, really easy, just grab one of those edges and stretch it up. Okay, so there, that's it there. And then I want to do the top. Now the top, what I think I'll do just to simplify it a bit, just do a rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to do that. A little heavy. I'm going to pull this in. And so what I did here, I want to just sort of create a bit of a, I guess, sort of a trapezoid shape. So I'm going to grab, I think I can do this. I'm going to hold Shift, grab both of these. No, not grab both of them over. Usually I can bring this in. So I got both of those selected. Just give me 1 second to think about this. Well, we'll just sort of drag these in. I think there's a way to scale them equally, but for the moment, just drag those corners in using the direct selection tool, so the white arrow. And then you get something like that. So that should be pretty good. And then I'm just going to take these. I think I'm going to bring, I should actually, well, I'll bring those down. It will tell me where. Should tell me where. Shoot straight across. I think that's okay. Usually it sort of gives you a little indication there. So I'm just trying to see if that will help me. This looks a little off. I'm going to bring that down. It's snapping, unfortunately. So let me just do this again. I'm going to drag those. I'll drag them both down. Hold Shift. I can grab both. bring those down, just keeping it straight. And then I think what I'll do is I'll just, with both of those drag them in a little bit, and I'll probably do the same thing here, just to round it off a little bit. Like I said, I'm just trying to create this little lamp idea here, which was in this winter scene. So just trying to recreate that. The little circle on top, just a rounded rectangle, or just a circle, and probably bringing it in. Something like that probably is good. I'll probably just join those two together with Pathfinder, unite them. And then I'm trying to create a little bit of a light. So what I'll probably do is just draw something here. I'm going to just take my pen tool, which we haven't used, and I'm just going to draw straight across here. I'm just going to draw it too, and then I can hold shift and it would make it straight. And then I'm just going to kind of follow this angle. So like that, hold shift, I can go straight to about there, and then just back up. So what I've just created is a shape here, and I'm going to fill it with yellow. There it is. Might be a little bit bright of yellow. Let me just see. Whoops. Change the yellow there a little bit, maybe that one. And add a little bit of a blur to it too. Well, before I do that, maybe I'll just round these edges. Soften it a little bit, and then just use that Gaussian blur again. So effect, blur, Gaussian blur. Now it did the wrong one. Let's just see, or maybe it's just too much there. There we go. It's just too much. So something like that. Okay, pull that back. Not bad. So the only other thing really that I did was I added this little path. And then, yeah, just a little bit of shadows under there as well. So let's just quickly do that, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to grab the rectangle tool again, and I'm just going to draw this here, change that color probably to some sort of gray, maybe like that. And again, I've just applied a sort of one of these tools here. So I'm going to go under, there's a warp. There's a pucker, wrinkle. Now, which one did I use? Give me a second here. Did I use the warp tool? Just a second. And no, because that's going to use the brush. And so once you've drawn this, what I want to do is go under Effect up here, and there's Warp. And probably the best one there is the flag. And so you can see right away, I've got sort of this bit of a bend. You can increase the amount of bend, decrease the amount of bend, bend it the other way. I might bend it the other way there. Yeah, play around a little bit with if it gets thicker or thinner or whatever through it. So whatever, you can choose, just go okay. So I've created that little bit of a path. Just a few finishing touches here. One thing we want to do is put a little bit of shadow underneath the trees, the bench perhaps, and over here. And then add some snow, and finally we'll sort of cut everything so that we get the edges sort of cut off there. Makes it look just a little bit better. So first thing, I think we need to make a new layer here, and we'll just put it underneath this, I guess the foreground layer. Yeah, because that's everything there. So if we just put a layer under there, I'm just going to add and make sure that that's under there. And I can just call that maybe shadow. And make sure we're in that layer. Our brush, probably a light gray. I've just chosen something just a little bit off-white. And I'm just going to go underneath. And you can just see, it might be a little too light. Try something a little darker. And it just sort of goes underneath there. Again, I'm not, you might want to do a better job than I am doing, but that just sort of gives you the idea, maybe off a little bit. Okay, just some shadows there. Nothing too spectacular, but just adds a little bit to it. The other thing that we'll do, I've already got my layer here, but the layer on top, so you can add a layer. I'm just going to call that snow. And it's just a matter of, taking an appropriate brush size, and you can vary it, and probably making sure it's like a white. So I'm going to go back to this white here, and just, put some snowflakes in. Okay, nothing fancy, but You can just sort of speckle that, maybe a few smaller ones. Just make that brush smaller. Just try to randomize it. Maybe a few bigger ones as well. And you can just add as much snow as you see fit for your image here. Like I said, I don't want to bore you by doing this, but you can sort of go through. You could find some different patterns too if you just want something different than just a circle here. There are different brush patterns, and you can feel free to take a look at that. But that way, you know, you've got this snow layer in a separate one, probably a couple more, just maybe around over here too. Just make sure it looks like it's falling. There. Good. The last little bit that we'll do is we'll put a whole new layer on top. This is going to be our clipping mask. And basically, we're just going to clean up those edges. So all I'm going to do is take a box there, and I'm going to go right to the corner. I'm going to basically go right down to this corner here. So I should have drawn a box. Now it's empty, so that's fine. We can just sort of see everything there. And then what I'm going to do is select everything. So if you've got anything locked, make sure that those are all off. I'm going to just take my selection tool, drag a whole box around it, like that. So everything is selected. And then what I'm going to do is come under Object, Clipping Mask, and Make. And all it does is whatever was in that layer, and you can see now everything's in kind of this layer here, this clipping group, it basically just you know, cleaned up the edges, made everything go into that box. So the tree, you know, where it was sticking out, it goes the building, right? It just goes back into the picture there. So it just cleans up the edges, makes it a little bit more, you know, presentable here at least. And if you did export it or if you did, you know, print it out, it wouldn't print those edges anyways, but it just looks a little bit more presentable in our little picture right here. Good. So I hope you've got a reasonable looking city. Feel free to add anything you want. Put a snowman in there, remove the bench, move the light over, do whatever. Design a different light that looks better. You know, the possibilities are endless. And so feel free to make this your own city. Good luck.